Hello, Slicey Dicers. This is Brian with another knife review for you. Today we have the Spyderco RockJumper. This is a new knife for 2020 from their kind of same old formula from Japan with the VG-10 and the FRN handles. I have been fairly outspoken about not loving a lot of them. I came into the knife world like about 3 years ago, and even back then I thought kind of the Delica was a bit overpriced in this kind of steel and handle format. I don't really love Spydercos VG-10. It's a little soft for my tastes, and I've just never been super in love with that Japanese FRN. But this one may be an exception. This is not going to be another Brian Spyderco bash fest. My primary issue, I guess, is that they're overpriced. The Delica is like $78 now. This is $86. Still, I think a bit pricey for the materials you're getting, but I do really like the design. So we'll get into that as we go on here. But yeah, you're looking at $86 VG-10 FRN. Nice pocket clip on it. It is four-way adjustable, which is pretty cool. I do like it. It's a completely ambidextrous knife, absolutely 100% for sure. And I really like me a Wharncliffe, that is for sure. And I like good ergonomics. And this has that in spades. So let's do some specs and some size comparisons before we get too much farther. You have pretty good mid EDC size, small-ish EDC size. You have an overall length of 7.5 inches, blade length just under 3 inches at 2.83 inches, and you have a blade thickness of 0.12 inches. Handle thickness of 0.42 inches, pretty thin. And a weight, according to my scales, of dead on 3 ounces. They claim 3.1, but I'm getting dead on 3 ounces on my scale. So let's do some size comparisons that I am horribly prepared for and had stuff in front of my drawer, but there, we can access it now. Compare it to your Spyderco PM2. You can see it's a little bit smaller than that. The Para 3, I probably should have pulled up my Para 3 lightweight for this, but alas, I did not. This is the regular Para 3 Maximet, but yeah, same size. So kind of right between those. Like I said, pretty good, just kind of averagey EDC size. And then we'll bring out our usual Benchmades, and then we'll bring out some other Spydercos in this kind of vein, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we have your full-size Benchmade Griptilian and the full-size Bug Out. Another knife you kind of think about in this. These are both kind of intended for, you know, trekking, climbing, backpacking-y kind of lightweight stuff. So it does, I guess they're somewhat in the same vein. I don't know. This is infinitely lighter weight, but. And now, bring in a few more Spydercos. So I've had experience with almost every iteration of the Japanese VG-10 FRN Spydercos, and honestly, the only other one I've kept was also a Wharncliffe. Maybe that's the deciding factor here for me subconsciously, but this is the Dragonfly 2 Wharncliffe. All my other ones, K390, Delicas, all that stuff, I've always wound up letting go. I do have a Delica, but it is not one of the VG-10 plastic handle ones. It is the Knife Center exclusive with the pack of wood and the HEP 40 sus10, and this is honestly for sale right now. So I'm not in love with the Delica. It's an icon, and I don't mean to diss that in any way whatsoever, but that's just kind of how I feel about it. It's just one that's never really connected me. This is the nicest one I think you can get and the best bang for the buck, even though it's very expensive. It's much more than the regular one, but still, you're getting a really cool steel, HEP 40 and sus 410 and pack of wood and all that. But we're talking about the RockJumper. Bringing a couple of other. I'm not an FRN hater. It's not that, because I do have other FRN knives. I'm going to bring out two Spydercos that are also FRN, but they're US FRN. We have two of my Manix 2 lightweights, and this is a knife that this kind of reminds me of. It's just a little bit of a smaller Manix 2. We'll talk about this a lot. This is my OG, kind of the knife that started the channel for me. That is the OG Manix 2 lightweight, and then I liked it so much that I did wind up investing $209, which is a lot of money, but it's the Maximet version, which I'm kind of liking Maximet a lot lately. So you saw I just had a Maximet Pair 3 as well. But yeah, this personality-wise, it kind of reminds me of like a backlock version of those more than some of the other ones. We're going to set one of these aside at least because it is definitely going to appear later on in the video. So what do I think about this knife and its individual parts? The blade, the most important part. It's still that VG-10 from Spyderco. I still find it to be a bit too soft. I'm a bit annoyed that for the amount you have to sharpen it, at least put a sharpening choil on it. That's one thing that's always bothered me about them. But it does sharpen up super easy. I'll give it that. It's about 24 thousandths behind the edge. So 25 thousandths behind the edge, sorry, which is a bit thick, but it is pretty thin blade stock, that very high flat grind. It's still an excellent slicer. It still slices really well. And for a Warney, it has a decent tip on it. It's still fairly dainty, but for a Warney, it ain't bad. Don't mind that at all. But it's an okay blade, but again, it's just that Spyderco VG-10. I just have not had the best experience with it, and maybe it's just me. I know every time I comment on it, people say, no, I think it's great, but I've had lots of them, and I find it always to be a bit soft. Yes, it does sharpen easily, but it sharpens too easy, if that makes sense. You can put a screaming edge on one of these things, absolutely. You can put drop a piece of toilet paper from 5 feet away, and it'll just cut right through it. You can put a great edge on it, but it ain't gonna last that long, and that just kind of I guess I'm more of a guy who prefers a really good working edge that lasts a long time, more than having a razor blade, that lasts 3 days. That's just kind of my opinion. One thing where this knife did not disappoint me, and probably where I fell in love with it, honestly, fell in heavy like with it, we'll put that, is the ergonomics are just perfection. This is so good. There is no jimping up here on the hump, which a lot of these have. I can't say I miss it. Maybe I would if I was working really hard with it, but I can't say I miss it that much. The bidirectional FRN, talk about whatever you want with the looks, it works. This thing ain't going nowhere in your hands, and for its intended purposes, like I said, they talk about, trekking, climbers, hikers, stuff like that. It ain't going anywhere. If you're in the wet or whatever, it's perfect. Pocket clip, at least in this, right hand tip up configuration, totally disappears. I have not tried it in the others, I will say that, I will admit that, but because this is how I carry knives, so it doesn't really matter to me. But it's super comfortable. Maybe a couple of sharp edges around the FRN, but not too bad at all. Not too bad really at all. Now, how does it carry? You can see already, it's got a pretty good hump on it. So it is a pretty tall knife, in this dimension, but we'll bring out Yale Levi's. I will always say one thing that Spyderco does that so many companies don't do, and I don't understand, put your logo or put something under the contact point of the pocket clip. They do that, and it always works great. That is one thing I will say for the Japanese FRN Spydercos. They do an excellent job of that. Is it deep carry? No, and you have several big bright silver screws sticking out, but not the end of the world. Currently, this is, by the way, only available in this black, and you can get it with a this edge or a fully serrated edge. Getting your hand past it, yeah, it's definitely there. It is a tall knife, but it's not too bad, and the weight's okay. 3 ounces. Yeah, with all this FRN and stuff, maybe you'd expect it to be a little bit lighter, but it carries fine. Very thin handle, so it carries okay. It does kind of remind me the way it carries of, we'll grab one of them here, the Maximet. This is the one that is within my eyesight, so we'll get, of the Manix 2. It's not quite as tall in the pocket as a Manix 2. It's a little easier to get your hand past than a Manix 2, but not dramatically so. So it is a bit of a pocket filler for a less than 3-inch blade knife, but I don't really knock it too much for that, I have to say. And as far as the action goes, one of the best backlock Japanese Spydercos I've ever handled. Now, I will admit, I have not taken this apart. I've had it for going on a week now, but it worked really well out of the box. And if this is anything like the Delica, these FRN Japanese Spydercos are kind of a pain in the arse to get the spring back in right. I don't know if this one is built that way, but I didn't really care to find out because it works well, so I didn't take it apart. But I don't know if they did something different with the pivot, but man, it's one of the best ones I've ever felt. It is just a little wrist flick and it drops. Plenty of room, so you're not going to chop your finger off. You just put your finger high up here. You have, even relatively high, you still have plenty of room there before it's going to hit you and give you a bite mark. No problem there. Does flick really well. Little bit of wrist, it will Spidey flick. Not bad. I can't complain about the action at all. For a backlock, you have to understand this is a backlock. Don't expect it to be a fidget toy. But if you go into that, knowing what you're going into, it's completely fine. My conclusions, it's still $86, and it's still fancy plastic, and not, in my opinion, the world's best VG-10. That's a bit hard to swallow, and I know I'm going to get a chorus of comments saying it's not worth it, and a chorus of comments saying that it is because it's a Spyderco, but because both have their fans and both have their opinions. And, you know, usually I think I'd fall down on the side of it ain't worth it, because I've said that about a whole lot of Japanese VG-10 Spydercos, but this one I just really like. I just really, really like it. That said, I won't have this for long. As soon as they do a sprint run of any other steel, I'll probably buy it. Because it is one thing Spyderco is good about. When they do the sprints, usually the upcharge for the steel is not much. So say they do this, I'm just throwing stuff out there. I don't know anything about anything that's going on. But, you know, say they do this in K390. This one's 86. Probably a K390 one's going to be, what, 100 at the most. I would probably jump on it. And, yeah, and then I'd be a very, very happy boy. I do love the ergos of this. I think it's perfect for the purposes it's intended for. I like a Wharncliffe a whole lot. I love the blade shape. It's plenty slicey enough. And it's just, yeah, those ergos are just so good. And that's one of the things that Spyderco does, I think, as a whole, take their entire discography. I think they do better than anybody else is ergonomics, and this is definitely one of the prime examples of that. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I've been Brian. Have a good one.